My name is Emily Carter. I'm 34 years old, and I have a bad habit of checking my phone one last time before sleeping, even when I promise myself I won't. That night, I was already in bed. Lights off. Blanket pulled up to my chin. My phone buzzed once. Then again. Then kept buzzing like it was nervous for me. I opened it without thinking. And there it was. My name wasn't written. But it didn't need to be. The story was long. Emotional. Carefully written. The kind of post people stop scrolling for. The kind that makes strangers feel like they know the truth. My chest tightened as I read sentence after sentence that felt familiar. Too familiar. Details only one person knew. Moments I had shared in private. Feelings I had whispered, not posted. The worst part wasn't the post. It was the comments. People were reacting fast. Choosing sides. Filling in gaps with their own assumptions. Some were sympathetic. Some were cruel. A few tagged others, pulling more eyes into it. I watched my life turn into a discussion thread while my hands went cold. I refreshed the page. More comments. I checked my messages. Is this about you? I didn't know that happened. I hope you're okay, if it's true. If. I wanted to scream. I wanted to explain. I wanted to crawl out of my own skin. Instead, I stared at the screen, feeling smaller with every second. This wasn't a stranger. This wasn't gossip. This was someone I trusted enough to know my weak spots. Someone who knew exactly how this would land. I didn't respond that night. I didn't sleep either. I just lay there listening to the quiet, realizing something had shifted permanently. My story was no longer mine. What I didn't know then was that I wasn't the only one reading. Someone else saw it too. Someone who remembered everything. And they weren't willing to stay silent. I didn't grow up in a loud family. We were the kind that spoke carefully, avoided scenes, and believed silence could fix most things. My parents taught us to keep problems inside the house. Don't embarrass yourself. Don't air dirty laundry. Smile through it and move on. I learned that lesson early. My mom worries quietly. She asks how you're doing, but never pushes for the full answer. My dad believes intentions matter more than impact. If someone didn't mean to hurt you, you're supposed to forgive them quickly. That mindset shaped me more than I realized. I have one younger sister, Hannah. She's always been more protective than I am. More willing to say the uncomfortable thing out loud. When we were kids, she'd speak up if something felt unfair. I learned to smooth things over instead. Even now, she tells me I give people too much access to my heart. She wasn't wrong. Friendships mattered to me more than most things. I didn't have dozens of them, but the few I chose deeply. Loyalty wasn't something I talked about. It was something I practiced. I listened. I remembered details. I kept secrets even when they sat heavy in my chest. That's how she and I became close. We met during a time when both of us were struggling. Different reasons, same exhaustion. Late conversations. Long messages. Shared fears we didn't feel safe telling anyone else. She used to say I made her feel seen. I believed that meant we were safe with each other. Looking back, there were signs I ignored. She liked attention. Not loudly. Subtly. Stories framed just right. Sympathy earned through carefully chosen details. Sometimes she'd share moments online that felt a little too personal, but I told myself it was harmless. That was just how people connected now. I never thought I'd be part of one of those stories. By the time my family noticed something was wrong, it was already unfolding publicly. And the instinct they raised me with kicked in immediately. Stay quiet. Don't make it worse. Let it pass. I wanted to believe that would work. By morning, the story was everywhere. Not viral in the celebrity sense. Worse. Viral in the way real people's lives go public. Mutual friends. Old co-workers. People who knew just enough to think they understood. The post had been shared into private group chats, sent with quiet captions like "This sounds familiar," or "I think this is about Emily." I kept refreshing even though it hurt. I needed to know how bad it was getting. She had written it like a confession. Like she was finally brave enough to tell her truth. She talked about being betrayed, manipulated, emotionally drained by someone close to her. Someone who leaned on her too much. Someone who played the victim. Every sentence felt like it was pointing at me without saying my name. What made my stomach turn was how polished it was. Not angry. Not messy. Controlled. Emotional in the right places. She had learned exactly how to sound believable. She used phrases I'd used with her in private. Feelings I'd admitted on nights I was barely holding myself together. I recognized my own words dressed up as her pain. My phone started buzzing again. This time it wasn't questions. It was reactions. A former friend sent, "I hope you reflect on this." Another wrote, "I'm disappointed. I didn't think you were that kind of person." That kind. I stared at those messages, feeling something crack open in my chest. Not anger yet. Disbelief. The quiet horror of realizing people were forming opinions about me without ever asking. I finally messaged her. I kept it calm. I told her people were recognizing me. I asked her to take it down or clarify. I reminded her of the conversations we'd had. The trust we'd built. She replied hours later. She said she hadn't named me. She said I was being defensive. She said if the shoe fit, maybe I should ask myself why. That's when it hit me. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't careless oversharing. This was deliberate. She needed a villain in her story. And I was convenient. I watched as she posted again later that night. Not directly about me. Just vague lines about standing in your truth and people exposing themselves. The comments filled with praise. Hearts. Support. I put my phone face down on the table and finally let myself cry. Not because people believed her. But because the person who knew me best was the one teaching them how to misunderstand me. And the silence I'd been raised to trust suddenly felt like betrayal too. I didn't respond right away. Not publicly. I needed time to breathe. To think. To remind myself that reacting in panic would only give her more control. Still, the silence felt like it was swallowing me. Every hour that passed, her version settled deeper into people's minds. So I started documenting. Screenshots first. The post. The comments. The timestamps. Then I went back further. Old messages between us. Late-night texts where I was breaking down and she was telling me to lean on her. Voice notes where she reassured me I wasn't too much. That I wasn't a burden. I read them slowly, like evidence from a life I almost didn't recognize anymore. When I finally posted, I kept it small. No long explanation. No name-calling. Just a simple statement. That I had seen a story circulating. That it described events inaccurately. That I was hurt. That some things shared publicly were taken from private conversations without consent. I didn't accuse. I didn't expose everything. I didn't tag her. Still, it was enough. People reacted instantly. Some messaged privately, apologizing. Saying they hadn't realized. Others went quiet. A few doubled down, saying I was being vague on purpose. That if I had nothing to hide, I should just say everything. They didn't understand. This wasn't about winning. It was about surviving with my dignity intact. She responded the way I expected her to. Not directly. Never directly. She posted another story about being gaslit. About people trying to silence her truth. About how painful it was when the very person who hurt you refused to take accountability. The comments swelled again, louder this time. I felt exposed in a way I'd never experienced. Like every part of me was open for interpretation. Strangers debated my character while I sat alone on my couch, staring at a screen that wouldn't stop refreshing. My mom called, worried. She told me to stop reading. My sister told me to speak up louder. Everyone had advice. None of it fixed the ache sitting behind my ribs. Then a message came through I wasn't expecting. It wasn't sympathy. It wasn't judgment. It was someone saying, "She's not telling the whole story. And I can prove it." I stared at that line for a long time before replying. Because in that moment, I realized something was shifting. This was no longer just about what was said online. It was about what had been hidden for a long time. After that message, nothing felt quiet anymore. I replied carefully, my fingers hovering over the screen before every word. I asked what they meant. How they knew. Why they were reaching out to me now. The typing bubble appeared. Disappeared. Came back again. They said they'd been watching from the beginning. That they recognized patterns because they'd been on the other side of them before. That what was happening to me looked painfully familiar. Meanwhile, things were escalating publicly. Mutual friends started choosing sides without saying they were choosing. Invitations stopped coming. Group chats went silent. People who had once laughed with me now avoided eye contact online. And others, people I barely knew, suddenly felt entitled to weigh in on my character. She leaned into it. Her posts became sharper. Still indirect, still framed as healing, but the timing was obvious. Every time I stayed quiet, she filled the space. Every time I tried to be measured, she painted herself as wounded. I felt cornered. My family was split. My mom begged me to log off, said the internet forgets eventually. My sister was furious, pacing my living room, telling me this wasn't fair and silence wasn't strength anymore. I stood between them, exhausted, unsure which voice to trust. Then the private messages started. One from a former coworker saying they'd seen something similar happen years ago. Another from someone I barely remembered, apologizing for judging too quickly. Each message chipped away at the story she'd built. And then she made a mistake. She hinted that there was more she could say. That she'd been protecting someone else. That she was choosing kindness by not revealing everything. It was subtle, but it landed like a threat. My chest tightened. That's when the person who had messaged me earlier sent another text. They didn't ask if I was ready. They said, "I have screenshots. I have dates. I have messages where she admits what really happened." I felt sick. Not relieved. Not excited. Sick. Because I knew what that meant. If this came out, it wouldn't just clear my name. It would expose hers. And once something like that is public, there's no putting it back. I sat alone that night, phone in my lap, thinking about the years I'd defended her. The secrets I'd kept. The way I'd absorbed blame quietly because it felt easier than conflict. The truth was heavy. But the lie was crushing me. And for the first time since this began, I understood that staying silent wasn't protecting anyone anymore. It was just delaying the inevitable. It didn't come from me. That's the part people still don't expect. I didn't post the screenshots first. I didn't tag her. I didn't write a dramatic thread explaining everything she'd done. By the time I woke up that morning, my phone was already lighting up in a way it never had before. The truth was out. The person who had reached out didn't announce themselves. They shared facts. Dates. Messages. Conversations where she said things completely different from what she'd posted publicly. Screenshots where she admitted she'd twisted the story because she needed people on her side. Voice notes where she laughed about how easy it was to control the narrative if you cried first. No commentary. No insults. Just proof. The internet shifted fast. Faster than I was ready for. Comments that had once praised her courage turned cautious. Then quiet. Then uncomfortable. People started asking questions she couldn't answer without contradicting herself. She tried at first. She posted about privacy. About being misunderstood. About how screenshots never tell the full story. But the timestamps didn't lie. The patterns were too clear. And suddenly, the emotional language that had worked so well for her worked against her. That's when I spoke. Not to attack her. To tell the truth. I posted a single video. No makeup. Hair pulled back. Voice shaking, but steady enough to be understood. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list every wrong. I just explained how private conversations had been used without my consent. How silence had been mistaken for guilt. How betrayal doesn't always come screaming, sometimes it comes wrapped in empathy. I said her name once. Not in anger. In grief. She never responded directly to me after that. Her accounts went quiet. Posts disappeared. Comments were turned off. Friends who had loudly supported her suddenly remembered they were staying neutral. I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. Because clearing my name meant losing someone I once trusted completely. It meant accepting that the person who called me safe had never planned to keep me that way. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, phone face down, listening to the quiet return. It wasn't peaceful yet. But it was honest. The story had finally stopped being about who cried louder. It became about who told the truth, and who couldn't live inside it once it was exposed. The day after the truth came out, everything felt different. The world didn't stop spinning, but the weight on my chest lifted slightly, like I'd been holding my breath for months and finally exhaled. People who had doubted me reached out privately, apologizing, admitting they hadn't known the full story. It wasn't about praise, it was about acknowledgement, and that mattered more than I expected. She didn't reach out. Not once. I don't know if she deleted her accounts, or if she just hid behind silence. I didn't ask. Part of me wanted answers, another part didn't care. She had chosen her path. I had chosen mine. My family, who had watched me crumble quietly for weeks, finally relaxed. My mom hugged me, whispered, "I'm proud you stayed true," and I felt tears sting my eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. My sister, who had been furious on my behalf, finally smiled. "You didn't lose yourself," she said. And she was right. In all the chaos, I hadn't lost myself. I had only learned to stand firm in what was mine. Even the public fallout was strange. People moved on quickly online, as they always do. But a few messages lingered, from people who thanked me for speaking calmly, for showing that truth doesn't need to be dramatic to be heard. It was a quiet kind of validation, far from the likes and hearts I'd seen before, but far more meaningful. I spent days reflecting on what happened. On the friend I'd lost. On the trust that had been broken. On the moments I'd questioned myself because others had misinterpreted my silence. It hurt. It hurt deeply. But I realized that pain was a marker, not a punishment. It was a reminder that protecting yourself isn't betrayal. That boundaries aren't unkind, they're necessary. I also understood something crucial: sometimes the people you expect to protect you won't, and that's not the end of the world. Other people, strangers even, can step in when you least expect it. And sometimes, justice isn't loud. It's quiet. It's measured. It's truthful. By the end of that week, I had started feeling normal again. My phone buzzed less with comments, more with real messages from real friends. I could scroll without cringing. I could breathe without tension. The story that had consumed me was finally over. The damage that could have been permanent had been stopped before it spread any further. And the most important thing? I still had myself. And for the first time in weeks, that felt like enough. Sitting here now, weeks later, I still think about that night when I first saw the story. The panic. The disbelief. The way my chest had felt like it was caving in. It's hard to believe that was me, lying awake and wondering if the people I trusted most would ever see the truth. I've learned that some people will surprise you, not always in ways you expect. Betrayal can come from someone you love, someone you've trusted completely. And sometimes, help can come from someone you barely know, someone who sees what you can't. It doesn't make the pain less real, but it reminds you that the world isn't only filled with disappointment. I also learned that silence isn't always virtue. It can be, sometimes, but not when your story is being told for you, in a way that twists your life into something it's not. Speaking your truth doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be revenge. It has to be honest. That's the difference. That's what makes it stick, not just online, but in your own mind, in your own heart. I've started to rebuild trust, slowly, cautiously, but with more awareness. I pay attention to the people I let close to me. I ask for boundaries, and I respect others too. I don't assume loyalty, I notice it. And I've realized that my value isn't dictated by someone else's story or perception. My name, my truth, my feelings, they belong to me first. If this story resonates with anyone watching, I want you to remember, it's okay to protect yourself. It's okay to speak up. And it's okay to let go of people who can't hold your trust with care. Life will test you, but it will also show you who truly stands by you. And when that happens, you'll understand that the quiet, steady strength you've built inside yourself is what really matters. I'm Emily Carter. I'm 34. And for the first time in a long time, I feel seen, not by strangers online, not by the person who tried to define me, but by myself. That's a kind of freedom no post, no story, no betrayal can ever take away.